you all. Thank you all for coming. It's a very important event in the history of our school district to bring the superintendent in, and it's always something that's taken that the board takes great responsibility for, and also spends a tremendous amount of effort and energy to do. So tonight's meeting is primarily a Q&A. We really wanted to get Dr. Carpenter at his own request an opportunity to come and visit with members of the community who may have questions for him. Our staff, we did send some communiques out to our staff, which I think many of you have seen, and we would continue to try to answer those questions that the community has about the transition that we have coming up. The format for tonight's event will be a written response Q&A. You all received cards when you came in. The reason we're doing that's twofold. First of all, we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to send their question up to the front, and then we also wanted to make sure that we were not answering the same question a whole bunch of times. So this way we'll go through those. Mr. Baird has volunteered to be the one who goes through our questions to organize those into like categories, and then he will bring those to Dr. Carpenter. So that will be the format. We do want to indicate a couple of things up front. I would have preferred that we were down there. That's more. I don't really care for being up here like this. It's not the way if any of you remember having me for class, that's not where I like to stay, and it was probably hard to keep track of me because I tend to move around a lot. But we're here, as Dr. Benson indicated, primarily because of the videotaping, so that we can make sure that we have an adequate taped copy of this for all of those patrons who were unable to attend tonight and who would like to see Dr. Carpenter's responses. So that's the reason for the dais. It's just one of those things that unfortunately our space did not allow us to do it in a different manner. So for that, I apologize. I would much prefer to be closer to the audience than we are here. The second thing I wanted to let everyone know is that, as you probably already know, we have a completed and executed contract with Dr. Carpenter. We are looking forward to him coming on board on July 1st to lead our school district, and our board is committed to that process and committed to that across all of us. So we are supporting Dr. Carpenter in his movement towards our district, and we saw a lot of very, very positive things in Dr. Carpenter as we spent quite a bit of time with him, and we're able to ask him some pretty tough questions, and honestly, he asked us some pretty tough questions. And in that dialogue, it became apparent that he was the person that we felt was the right person to lead our district here forward. So that's the preliminary information that we have, and at this point, I will introduce Dr. Dennis Carpenter and let him begin his portion of the presentation.
Thank you. Okay, I'm super excited to be here, and I want to thank you all for spending a little time this evening. I know it takes away from important time with family and the life, so we want to honor that time as we move through this program. I had my introduction to Lee Summit West today at about 10 a.m. And that came in the form of Mackenzie and Lauren, two seniors who are big members of the communications program and the broadcasting team here at the school. They came over and they interviewed me in my office in my current district. So I will tell you this evening, number one, Principal Sharp, they represented your fine school very, very well, wherever you are. And I will also tell the audience, you probably can't come up with any questions any tougher than the two girls. They hit all of the tough questions, so they've been watching news outlets and they know the questions. But representing the school district extremely well, Lauren's on her way to UM to be a part of that communications program, and Mackenzie is on her way to Oklahoma State. So I'm super excited to spend time with them this morning. It's probably one of the few times over the course of our relationship, me serving as your superintendent and you being our awesome community members that support that work. But this will probably be one of the few times that I have you really, really attentive and I can get you possibly to participate in an activity. And I'm just an old elementary school teacher.
Dr. Carpenter?
Yes, sir.
Would you come down here where there's more light over here?
Perfect.
I can barely see you.
Thank you. So I'm just this old elementary school teacher, and to get this conversation started, okay, and to get this conversation started, thank you, Mr. Baer, I want to begin with an activity. And I think this activity is pretty cogent, given how we arrived in this space. So, when you came in, one of your charges was to get a sheet of paper and a pencil. And I'm referring to that piece that's number 1 through 10. Raise your hand if you have it. The more the better. Perfect. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. You have the sheet of paper. It's number 1 through 10. I'm going to flash some words up on the screen, and I'm going to put them up for all of 10 seconds. When I finish, I want you to capture as many of the words as possible. As many as possible. 1 through 10. Everyone with a pencil, paper, 10 seconds only. Let's do it. Take about a minute, capture as many words from the list as you are able to capture. Take a lot of time. We want to honor the time and the questions. 31 seconds. All of the words that you might be able to capture. Okay. Like any good teacher, 21st century learning skills call for kids to collaborate. And back when I was going to school, they called that cheating. So tonight, we're going to do some collaboration. One condition, you have a partner to your left or your right. I want you to get with that partner and share your words, let them share their words. One condition, if you get a word from them that you do not have, you can take that word, write it on your paper, but you must circle it. You must circle the word that you received from a partner. So go ahead with the partner. Okay, about 15 seconds to wrap up with your partner. If you get a word from a partner, circle the word. Circle the word. If you get it from a partner, circle the word. Okay. So if you have slumber, stand up. Stand up if you have slumber. Okay. A lot of people got slumber. Why do you think you got slumber? Anybody? First word, pretty easy. First thing I heard, I forget slumber. Okay, sit down, slumber. What about night? Stand up if you got night. Stand up. Either way, if you have night, stand up. Okay, night was up there. Sit down. Stand up if you got bed. Okay. Good job, bed folks. Sit down, bed folks. Stand up if you got sleep. Okay. I have news for you. Sleep was not up there. Now, don't make those folks, I saw them all sit down. I want you to stand up if you feel like you missed sleep. When you saw sleep, stand up if you kind of feel like you missed sleep. Come on, honesty is the best policy. You thought it was up there, you felt like you kind of missed it. Okay, sit down. I want you to stand up. Stand up if you have sleep circled. If you have sleep circled, stand up. Okay. These are the folks that got sleep from someone else. Okay? Sit down. So oftentimes, things look like they make sense. They look like they have a connection. You get part of the information, you start inferring, and you start putting all this stuff together. And in my world, I say, you're putting sleep where it doesn't belong. You didn't see it. You didn't have a first-person account of it. So why would you put sleep where it doesn't belong? And sometimes things really look like they make sense. And it really looks like sleep needs to be there. But I will just tell you, for the sake of transparency, there's the list. There's the list. I think there's a lesson inherent in that. Sometimes we really think we know, but when I write sleep down and I really didn't see it, I have to own that fact that that's my sleep. I have to own it. And then when I circle sleep, man, I didn't even see it, but I'm carrying someone else's stuff. So now I'm helping them carry their stuff that really didn't exist. So I think when we don't share and we don't communicate at a high level, that causes us as humans to put sleep where it does not belong. And I will tell you over the course of the last 7 or so days, I've seen a lot of sleep placed where it doesn't belong. So maybe tonight we can clarify and really have a candid, genuine conversation about the 10 words that are really on the list. About who Dr. Carpenter really is. About what's the dream in his heart about being the superintendent of Lee Summit. How might he approach this work? And that's what we want to do this evening. Oftentimes you hear, he was the superintendent at the district next door, and I saw what happened in the district next door. Well, the district next door versus Lee Summit, 2 totally different districts, totally different needs, community needs, student needs, personnel needs, totally different spaces. So to believe that a leader, i.e. Dr. Carpenter, comes with a checkbox of leadership strategies, did this at Hickman Mills the first week, check that off now in Lee Summit. Do this at Lee Summit the second week, check that off, that's the one I did at Hickman Mills week 2. We really discredit the whole function of leadership. Because leadership is so situational. And situations determine and drive leadership. With that being said, I'm honored that you all are here, and I'm really looking forward to fielding some of your questions. Thanks. I don't know if I ever get a chance to get you all to participate in a lesson again. All right?
Well, at this time, we'd like to get directly to collecting our questions. So those members of SLC that can help us pick those up, if we could spread out, start collecting those for us, we really appreciate it.
I will ask Dr. Carpenter, could you lose that accent just for a little bit so we can
You know, I think it means
explain the accent?
the accent comes from being born and raised in the great state of Georgia. That's where it comes from. Oh, Georgia? Oh,
So I'm going to look through these and I'm going to allow others to answer. Thank you, Dr. 2019. While I try to read through these, and I'll group them so that I'm making sure that we're getting, all the questions answered. If two are, if a couple of questions are very similar, I will make sure I try to reference both of them as I ask the question and get all the answers that you might be looking for. But I will start, since I had one previous, I'm going to start with one of the hardest. So that's good. We're going to be real transparent here. Full disclosure type of thing. So this question, as you all know, there was a news story out that kind of turned the board's world upside down the other day because we couldn't, and we didn't get answers out fast enough in response to the news story. So here's one of the questions. Why did the Board of Education not mention the discrimination lawsuits filed against the Hickman Mills Board of Education at the initial announcement of their selection of Dr. Carpenter? So they're asking why didn't we, disclose that at the time that we actually approved the hiring of Dr. Carpenter. So I know that each board member has a different idea of how they would respond to that. But I'm going to let Chris start with that one, if you don't mind. Yeah, because Chris and I have talked about this because we have slightly different variations of how we approach this type of thing. And I'll also like our attorney to address much of the fact of how lawsuits work, school districts, and maybe we start there. Maybe Joe Hatley, our attorney for the board, can actually start off for us, Joe. Okay, Joe Hatley's going to start, our attorney.
Hi, I'm Joe Hatley, attorney for the school district, and I want to preface all this by pointing out that Missouri has some fairly unique laws on employment discrimination, and as a result, these suits get filed in Missouri a lot more frequently than they do in other states. There are cases that get filed in Missouri that would never get filed in Kansas. I don't want to get into all the technicalities of it, but Missouri has a much lower standard for proving these cases. The legislature this year is probably going to change that. This is a result of the Missouri Supreme Court decision from 2007 that's interpreted Missouri's laws. The legislature has been trying to change that every year, and it's probably going to happen this year so that Missouri gets in line with the other states and the federal government. So you have these suits that get filed more often in Missouri. And then in Jackson County, there are cases that result in jury verdicts that are mind-boggling. Just last month, someone took a case to trial in Jackson County jury and won $20 million on an age discrimination case that, according to the reports, she was willing to settle court trial for $500,000. So you put all that together, so you have these suits that get filed in Missouri a lot. We have a saying that anyone with a computer and $200 can file a lawsuit, and these employment discrimination cases just get filed a lot. So it's not fair to assume that just because a suit has been filed that someone in charge of an organization has done anything wrong. I want to make that point. The second point I want to make, and this is in response to some of the comments that were in the news, is that Dr. Carpenter's name is on some of these suits. Well, if you look closely at those suits, what it says is they sued, for instance, the Hickman Mills School District, serve Dennis Carpenter superintendent. It's very common. You have to tell the people who are serving a lawsuit who they need to serve. So if you look back, there have been these suits of this nature filed against Lee Summit, Blue Springs, every school district, and I represent several. This is simply a high cost of doing business in Missouri. These suits often will have the superintendent's name on them as someone to be served. It doesn't mean that the superintendent was involved in the situation or did anything wrong, simply because the superintendent's name is on that lawsuit. So I just want to give you all that preface for the discussion that's going to follow on this. And now I'll turn it over to Chris.
Well, I'll just add that, because people say, well, how come you didn't know about this? Well, I look at CaseNet for stuff. I've looked at CaseNet for a lot of different things. And CaseNet in Missouri. If you just go in and Google and type in Missouri CaseNet, it'll come up with it, and you can search in most every district in court district in the state of Missouri, as well as appellate courts and whatever else. So I went in, I did this on all of our candidates, the ones that we had narrowed down before, and looked on CaseNet. But you can't just look on CaseNet and say, okay, is that person's name? You gotta dig a little bit deeper, and you look at parties, how the parties are listed. You look at, then you look at the docket entries. The party can be put as a member, as a party to the case, and end up being dismissed as part of that case as it goes on. And when I looked at it, I saw that Dr. Carpenter was not personally part of any lawsuit. And then that was after everybody started seeing each part of all these lawsuits, Joe verified for that for us as well. I would say even after some things came through in the last week, well, I think it was more after I saw the news report the other night of the reporter trying to save face and saying, well, he is on this lawsuit because his name's under there. Well, if you go, look in Lee Summit, every lawsuit Lee Summit's ever been served in, and believe me, school districts are served with lawsuits a lot. And they all read, there was our previous superintendent. The ones before that, they go back, Tony Stansbury. You go back even further than that, they're served on Gail Williams even. But that's not the party of the lawsuit. You go to the lawsuits, I went over and looked at Independence. Independence has, most every school district also has age of discrimination lawsuits against them as well. Independence lawsuits. And all of them. That's who's served is the school district, and it'll say the school district's name, and then it'll say the school superintendent's name. Occasionally, it may say board president's name, but that's who they're serving. But the majority of the time, it says school district and superintendent's name, because that's who they are serving the lawsuit to. It doesn't mean that person is named as a party to the lawsuit. So that's kind of the explanation. And yet, so yes, it was looked at prior to, and again, like I said, not just our final candidate, but for me personally, I looked at all of them.
Okay, very good. Thank you all. We've got some great questions up here. As far as any specific order, I think the best way is to keep on with the hardest ones first, if you don't mind, Dr. Carpenter. So we're going to have some real talk now because I've got a stack here of questions about, which I alluded to in a letter of mine recently. The letter that I wrote a letter, sent it to local media and Facebook, in which you've said a few things on Facebook. You wore a I Can't Breathe hoodie that has been circulating. You've also, you had some different things where some teachers from Hickman Mills, or at least supposedly from Hickman Mills, they've said that you have made racist comments, that you believe that white privilege is really white supremacy. So we got some tough questions for you here. Do you want to start from there?
I'd love to start there. I show up, I hear questions related to, I saw Dr. Carpenter with an I Can't Breathe shirt on Facebook or on somebody's picture somewhere or another. Yep. You saw Dr. Carpenter with an I Can't Breathe shirt on. Dr. Carpenter is a black male. Dr. Carpenter does not get to take off being a black male. He is a black male. He is raising a black son. He does have concerns when he sees African American males gunned down by police. He gets to have feelings. And because of that, absolutely, I have feelings about Trayvon Martin. Absolutely, I have feelings about Eric Garner. Absolutely, I have feelings about Mike Brown. And that does not mean anything about my ability to serve. That simply means that I am a black man living in these United States of America. That's number one. Number two, You're talking about our work in the Hickman Mills C1 school district. The board has a policy. We've been looking at Hickman Mills, so our board has a policy. And the board adopted a racial equity policy. Why did the board adopt a racial equity policy? We had a couple of board members go to a Council of Urban Boards of Education meeting. During that meeting, they met Mr. Glenn Singleton, the founder of the Pacific Educational Group. They came back and said, we need to be doing this work. Why do we need to be doing this work? Because 90% of our students are students of color, and 90% of our teachers are Caucasian. So despite, or in spite of our best efforts, there's this cultural disconnect that he talked about in that training that I believe our school district will benefit from. So I had Mr. Singleton, author of Courageous Conversations About Race, one of the foremost authorities on race in this country, come in and speak with our school board. During that time, the board made a commitment to racial equity professional development training and systemically interrupted those practices that lead to the predictably lower performance of kids of color. Through that training, there is some conversation about white privilege is in that training. And how do you know? Nobody's ashamed if they have it. No one should be ashamed if they have it. But how do you utilize it when working with urban youth and youth of color? And in that training, one of the pieces of the protocol is that you experience discomfort. And to engage in that training, it is somewhat uncomfortable. But as people are willing to lean into the conversation, what we found is teachers have changed their professional practice. And through that change in professional practice, I believe it has something slightly to do with our increases in performance. And that's something that as the leader of an urban school district, you don't apologize for. Because all students getting it is something that our democracy hinges on. And our democracy right now is fragile. And we know that the minority will become the majority in a few years. So how do we make sure that we effectively educate all students? And there's a framework. We didn't do Starbucks. So someone's trying to possibly take some of that out of context. Starbucks kind of said, customer walks up, talk to them about race. No, we engage systemically in learning a protocol. And through that protocol, we've been able to have courageous conversations. And for those who wanted to lean in, I think they've learned more. For those who have stepped away from the work, they've chosen not to engage. But it's a board-adopted framework.
Dr. Carpenter, can I follow up?
Yes, sir.
So just to, you know, they all know me as a straight shooter, and I'm just going to point blank ask you some questions. So, for example, I understand that you should not have to apologize as a black man in our society and for your beliefs, your personal beliefs and such. Some people, though, feel that maybe it's, they worry about your view of law enforcement. I come from a law enforcement family, an entire family full of highway patrolmen, policemen. My mom was a policewoman, my dad was a highway patrolman. So I can totally get it. I mean, I understand. So that's one concern. So trying to take the color out of this, that's not a color issue for people, and they really, it's come up a lot. It's come up a lot here today, but also in such. So how do you feel your relationship with law enforcement is, and what is your view of law enforcement?
I would tell you that we depend each and every day in our schoolwork on law enforcement. We work directly with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department with our SRO program, have a strong working relationship with them, very strong working relationship with the Chief of Police. And my entry plan for the district, we're talking very, very clearly about getting law enforcement involved in my entry planning process as well. Absolutely, there's a strong relationship with law enforcement. Just as there's a strong relationship with educators. But just like we have educators, we can just pick up the paper and read that make bad decisions. We have to honor the fact that all professions have it. And there's no either or. And oftentimes with these types of conversations, we want to make it either or. Conversation's too difficult to make it either or. Why can't it be an and but conversation versus an either or conversation? And so that's what we're learning in our district about honoring all perspectives and all voices. Because in the absence, the dominant voice carries the narrative and somebody's voice is simply not heard. And how do they show up in the organization when they know they're silenced and their voice can't be heard?
I think that you've answered the question with regard to color, let's just say. But I think still, I just want one more question on it, which is, people just, I've seen this, again, it might be one of those sleep things, but let's just clear it up. Some people have basically said that you have made teachers in Hickman feel like, almost like they should be embarrassed about being white, or that you put them on the spot and embarrass them, that type of thing. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry that anyone might feel that way, because the only engagement that we do, Mr. Baird, is in training, professional development. And generally, we have an external facility in that training. Now, does that mean when I'm there, I sit on my hands the whole time and don't say a word? Absolutely, I chime in during that training, like I do with any other training in our organization. But there's an expert, international facilitator in that space. So maybe the training, and it's just like we talked about the lawsuits a little bit earlier, attorney, it's always the superintendent made me feel, Dr. Carpenter made me feel, maybe the training made them feel, just like the lawsuit served to the district, but it's mine. You have to understand it.
So can we talk about the lawsuit? Numerous questions here. I want to know. They have questions of the board as far as our knowledge of the lawsuits. But there's also the issue of people feel that you are, whether you were named or not, you were an active player. Some people say, well, you're the one that gave the recommendations to the board. The Hickman Mills School District has lost one major case where a large sum of money has been granted against Hickman Mills School District in the Scully case. But then there's also the 27 NEA teachers and a few principals. So can you talk about these from your point of view? We've heard the attorneys and such.
Okay, so here's what I would do. I'll say two things, Mr. Baird, and then I'll try to offer a little bit. First off, I will say that I'm not going to say anything this evening to compromise my current employer's legal position. That's number one, because I do have a current employer, and I'm not going to compromise the legal position. The second thing I will say, there's something to be said for this missed word that we've kind of forgotten a lot about, and that's loyalty. And until June 30th, I am loyal to my employer. Absolutely I am. And I'm also loyal to this transition. So I'm going to try to offer a little bit. Here are some facts surrounding the NEA lawsuit involving the 27 teachers. The district had a position in the metropolitan area. It was kind of joked with me when I came to the district that Hickman Mills is the training ground for teachers. And the reason is two words, training ground, and the second word was because you have a donut hole in your salary schedule. And if you can kind of envision a donut hole, everything's good around the top of the donut, you get a few bites, and it's good at the bottom, but you better not be eating from the middle because there's nothing there. And teachers who were leaving, and we were losing about 20 to 25% of our teachers every year. And the common theme was, it was always the experienced teachers with advanced degrees that we were leaving, that we were losing. So without getting into much detail, that was a board priority the day they hired me. Just like one of this board's priorities is renewed trust with the community and transparency, thus what we're doing this evening. At that time, that was one of Hickman Mills' key priorities. My answer to the school board at that time was, let's build some trust, let's get the district moving on the academic front, and let's pick that up a year or so later. And the board honored that request, and we really got some other things going first. And that gave me a year to study what I know would be a very delicate issue. And sure enough, the facts played out very, very similar to what I was being told. So here are the facts surrounding the lawsuit. Number one, age never played a role in the decision-making process. Number two, it was a collaborative process. Teachers were involved, administrators were involved, union representatives were involved. That's number two. Number three, when the dust settled, the board had two things they could do. They could either approve the salary schedules and grandfather those teachers being impacted, and I want you to put a pin in teachers being impacted because I want to come back to that. Or they could approve it and not grandfather those teachers being impacted. So these are rough numbers, but here's what I remember. The recommendation carried with those two options. The district actually infused about $1.5 million into teacher salaries. So there was actually an infusion of $1.5 million into teacher salaries. That's number one.
You said how much?
1.5 million, give or take. Additional versus the previous year.
But you still had to make cuts.
Yes, and I want to talk about that. So about $1.5 million infused into teacher salary budget per the recommendation. The second part is 425 teachers received a pay raise. And about 77 teachers were in line for that pay decrease. And generally those teachers were teachers with lower degree levels that were way down, step I believe 21 plus, on the, or maybe even higher than 21 as I recall, on the district salary schedule. Now look at the salary schedules around the metropolitan area and find a salary schedule that has bachelor degrees that pay all the way down 21 plus years. I don't think there's one in the metropolitan area. So we infused $1.5 million into salary increases for 425 teachers, and 77 teachers received a decrease, and the board had to then decide whether they would grandfather those folks to the tune of, I think, about $400,000 if all of them were to come back year after year, $400,000 annually, or would they not? That's a policy decision. That was a board policy decision. And from a policy standpoint, we decided not to, the board decided on a vote of the full board unanimously to not grandfather. And thus, that's where we went from there. So I think the legal question now, and attorneys are here, they can speak to it better than I can, but the legal question now is whether the board had the authority to not grandfather those teachers or not. I think that's the legal question. And the board would say, yes, of course, and maybe the 24 of the 77 who decided to, I think about 24, who decided to participate in the lawsuit, of course they believe the board didn't have that authority. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps. One thing in the midst of that, I'd have to ask Joe Hadley, did you at the beginning talk about, because the board became aware of these issues and we had conversations with our attorney, Joe Hadley, and Joe had to take quite a bit of time explaining how these cases work. Did you talk about age discrimination laws at the beginning whenever I was looking through these? Okay, very good.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point that I would add to that. Now that you kind of bringing those thoughts back to my mind. Of those 425 employees who received that infusion of about $1.5 million in their salaries, many of them were over that legal standard of age 40. Many of them were over that legal standard of age 40. That's in discrimination law.
This one's a tough one because I've been, and many of us have been, all of us actually are strong proponents for teachers. So the truth is, Hickman Mills teachers are not real happy with you, some of them. And so they're talking to our teachers and they don't feel it was right. And so this is kind of your chance to, and you've explained it, but it's created a lot of stress on our teachers because they say, okay, are you going to come over here and do that? And I know that it's a different district, but you have that background where you get into this policy. So from teacher pay to to what kind of changes do you plan on making on this side?
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. Number one, this is how our society works. I've read some research one time, Bill, and the research and audience members, it stated that if you do something that people don't like, you have to do 20 things that are positive before it even starts to overshadow that thing that people didn't like. And it also says, when you do that, don't expect anybody to go cheerlead about it. So it doesn't surprise me that you are hearing from teachers who are disgruntled about some of those situations and those matters. It's just simply not surprising. But here's what I would say. None of those things were done in Hickman Mills because this authoritarian superintendent came in and unilaterally did them. That's just simply, if anyone's going to be genuine and be fair, they would say that Dr. Carpenter collaborates and that people get to come to the table and multiple perspectives get to be shared in that decision-making process. So what am I going to come to Lee Summit and do? Nothing except what's in our strategic direction that's developed collaboratively. Because when you look at what we've done in Hickman Mills, it's directly from our strategic framework. Directly from it. And that's developed by many, many people over time. So if you're thinking Dr. Carpenter's getting ready to check another box, that's what I was talking about earlier. No check box. That's not leadership. Leadership is the process that we get to. And in a Hickman Mills, low performing district, almost a state takeover when I arrived, many, many challenges. You bet the decisions are going to be tougher. And it took a lot of will and wherewithal, and I have a couple board members here tonight, and I want to honor them for having the courage. Because boys and girls are better because we made some tough decisions. And that's what's important. So no, there's no preconceived what Dr. Carpenter would do when he comes to Lee Summit, except look, listen, observe, look at our strategic direction, and once the board hits the gavel and say, this is where we're going, you're right, it's my job to then execute.
So no reapplying for their jobs.
No. Another decision that's been given to Dr. Carpenter. Dr. Carpenter came to the district, the board had chosen to non-renew city administration, non-renew secondary principals. I said, do whatever you need to do. When I come in, I'll pick the pieces up and get started. But of course, the new guy did it. The new guy did it.
Just to interject, from the board's perspective, you have a very strong Board of Education. Whether many people believe that or not, it is true. We have worked very hard to make sure that we are a strong, aggressive Board of Education that protects our students and our students' best interests. And what I will guarantee you, that as long as I sit on the Board of Education, in whatever capacity that may be, I will work my best to make sure that we, as a board, make those positive decisions and then direct our superintendent to carry them out. That's the way it's supposed to work. And that's the way it will work until I'm no longer on the board. And I see some of the folks in our audience who are aspiring to be board members in our district, and I'm pleased that we had so many people that stepped up to the plate, because this is a thankless and never-ending job. I'm sorry to have to tell you that. But it is also one of the most important jobs in this community. And we will make sure that we support that. And Dr. Carpenter is well aware of that. We've had those frank conversations during our interview. He understands that we set the direction for the district. It is his job, or Dr. Benson's, or whoever's person is sitting in that chair, it is their job to carry out our directives. And we are not going to do anything that is going to damage our teaching staff, our administrators, or our students without really good cause. And there aren't any right now.
And trust me, that's a good problem for the incoming superintendent to have. I look forward to there not being many of those.
Okay, Dr. Carpenter, I'm trying to keep them in some type of order that relates to the last topic. So we're talking about Hickman Mills and the different strategic plan, things you went through. So simply, this is pretty simple. How is the Hickman Mills better school now than it was before you became superintendent?
Well, I wish I had the time to go through something our community went through with our school board about a month and a half ago. but I think if you go on the Hickman Mills website, you can take a look at it. But what we did is we basically went through an exercise after 3 years of my leadership, and the board wanted to answer a philosophical question, that is, are we making progress? So the district placed all of that down on the table, analyzed it, and I would tell you that I'm super proud. It nearly brought tears to my eyes to present the progress we made. When you talk about, just to name a few, ACT scores, up. Parent and business communication in the schools, up astronomically. Discipline, students missing 3,500 days per year due to out-of-school suspension, more than cut in half. Every academic indicator from the state in this MSIP program, although we're not where we want to be, clearly up. 1 year, one of the largest increases of any district, K-12, urban or suburban, in the state. So to say that, so I'm not going to put Hickman Mills on trial when it comes to Lee Summit. Let's be clear, because I'm super, super proud of the work going on and that we've accomplished at Hickman Mills. So the question becomes, in my mind, how do you frame the leader in terms of one position versus realizing that leadership crosses the gamut? So there are things that are important in Hickman Mills that require me to use certain leadership muscle, and there are things important in Lee Summit that will require me to use other leadership muscle. I would tell you, as I look at where the district's going and where it's headed, it's going to require me to use less of the muscle I used in Hickman Mills and more of the muscle that I used as deputy superintendent in Georgia. I can see that just based on the district, based on the clientele. It was not a 100% free and reduced lunch district, my district in Georgia, like Hickman Mills. It was a more balanced, it was not 90% kids of color. So a lot of what I believe I might be encountering is very, very similar to that experience.
Okay, can you tell us about that experience a little bit more? You know, you were a deputy there, you did change, I think you changed schools a couple of times in that, you know, did you, because one of the questions said, why did you work in so many school districts? And I'm thinking, okay, I've looked at your resume quite a few times. But I know that you had success there, and then you got to get to the reasons why you left, because I've got a lot of questions on those things.
Never left a job in which someone wasn't pulling for me and it was promotion. Just simply has never happened. If you can look at my resume, you will see that I've gone to a different job. In every instance, it was a promotion. And in about 90% of those instances, somebody was looking for me.
Okay.
Somebody was looking for me, and I'm honored, and I'm humble. And that has to do with the mentors that I've been able to work with over the course of my career. But deputy superintendent for about 5 years.
And that district was not our size?
20,000 students.
Okay.
Growing suburban district just outside, about 30 miles east of Atlanta. Fast growing district at the time. And then we saw 2008, and that growth tapered off, and we had to do some things again that were unpopular. When you lose about $24 million in revenue, you just can't operate the same. And we saw that, and we made some decisions during that time also. So, lots of those types of experiences in a larger district.
Okay, two related follow-up questions would be, okay, so you've answered a few questions with regard to transitioning to our district from Hickman Mills, and we're pretty proud of our district around here. So we feel like, you know, we have a lot of positives in terms of academics, finances, annual performance reviews, and more. So, you know, what is your, yeah, I know you say, look, you're going to listen for 100 days and such, but what is your approach to Lee Summit with all these positives that we have to build on, as far as I'm concerned?
Just that. Build on those things that are positive, and really, really looking at how do we become, not the Missouri model, but man, there's so much potential to be that national model of what effective education looks like. I'm fortunate in terms of sitting on a couple of national boards. I'm on the Discovery Education International Advisory Board, And that has a lot to do with some of the work we did at Hickman Mills, and I was humbled when I was granted that opportunity. But when I look at my colleagues around the room, and I started looking during the time that I was thinking about Lee Summit, I'm like, my goodness, why is Lee Summit not at this table? That's one example. And those guys, I'm in that group because of the very unique work that we've done in an urban setting. But those gentlemen are in there because they are rocking it out in some of the best communities in this country, of which Lee Summit is one. And to have the opportunity to come in and bring my family and assimilate and be a part of it, I'm super, super excited. So just that, making that ascension into national greatness.
Dr. Carpenter, I'd like to make a comment, and I'd like for everyone to hear this. I'm a lifelong resident of this community. I've lived here, my parents have lived here, my children have gone through the schools. I currently have a fourth generation. So I want everybody to know that this decision to hire you was very personal. To find the very best person to run our district for our kids. And so I want the audience to know that we did go through a rigorous process during our interviews. We did narrow it to 2, and I remember so as vividly as I sit here, the night that we sat and met and we selected you as our new superintendent. And I, maybe speaking for the board, I'll speak for myself, but I believe I speak for everyone sitting up here, we were so excited that we could barely sit in our seats about you. We were so excited about your leadership style, your collaborative style, your wanting to raise all children up, your vision for our district, because we do have needs as well, that we believe in you. So what I'm trying to convey is the excitement that night when we selected you. We were told we couldn't say anything. There was a press conference. Do you know how hard that was? Because we were all so excited about you for our kids and our teachers. And so the day of the announcement, I feel like a kid myself. I'm ready. I'm ready for this district to move forward. I'm ready for a new exciting leader because I believe in you 100%. So that day of the press conference, I don't know the last time I shared so much enthusiasm, really. I was so excited. We announced it. I felt so good. I was excited. I called my daughter. I called friends. And for about a day, I got to really live that excitement. And then I had another side to the energy that I was facing. So for the last 6 days, I've had a lot of questions. I've had a lot of phone calls. I've had a lot of texts. Dr. Carpenter, we've all been called stupid. We've all been called incompetent. We've all been told we're an embarrassment to the community as a board. We were called a lot of things that I can't even go on further to say. I did a lot of talking, a lot of listening, mostly listening, a lot of talking, a lot of researching, and there were some things that I discovered that I didn't know. Last night I was in a restaurant, and I was celebrating my daughter's 32nd birthday, and the lady checking me in said, "Oh, you're on the school board," and I said, "I am." She said, "I love Dr. Carpenter. I love him. She's a teacher in your district." And she went on and on about every time you get in the building, the joy and the energy that you bring. So I went and sat down with my daughter and my grandson, and I really thought long and hard and prayed about it. And I'm here to tell you, I'm excited again about you. I am so excited about you, Dr. Carpenter. I believe it's been a tough road for all of us. But I'm so excited that I really want to get up and get everybody to do a cheer. But I won't. It's been tough. But when we get through all of that, we come back to the one real reason that we are sitting here is kids. And I found that you were that one that believes in the kids. And so I have to say this tonight. Thank you, and I'm excited about you. I really am.
Probably that opportunity, maybe one time that we're just so candid, and it seems like you created a space for me to say some things. So I appreciate you creating a space with your comments. Asa Hilliard is one of my mentors. Never met him a day in my life. He's deceased. I met him through the research. You should read some of his work. But he said, when you do things to improve the performance and improve the life prospects of the most disenfranchised, there will be no fanfare, and you need to be prepared for that. When you do things to improve the life prospects of the most disenfranchised, there will be no fanfare, and you need to be prepared for that. And that's what I say about my work at Hickman Mills, and I don't apologize for it. Do not apologize for it. Thank you for creating that space for me to say that.
Okay, very good. We are rolling. Some questions, I'm trying to get to a lot of these, to the heart of the matter, because I know this still got quite a few to go. So what are your views? You've talked a lot about the decisions you've had to make, but a lot of questions about staff. Again, I'm a teacher kind of guy, I'm a staff guy. And here's some different questions. I'm just going to read a few of them. Do you plan on bringing your team from Hickman Mills with you? Do you feel support staff is as important as certified staff? And are you a micromanager?
First one, do I plan to bring my team from Hickman Mills? I would tell you that you have something going for you as a community that's the envy of many districts around you. You have long tenured staff that allows some things to get ingrained, to get institutionalized, and that's probably one of the reasons for the district's high performance. You know, I met with the group at the district office the other day, and they kind of gave their names, how long they've been in the district. Super excited. And then somebody shared with me, Dr. Carpenter, minus retirement, we've only lost one senior person and they went to a superintendency. Man, the children are the beneficiaries of that. But in the event that there are vacancies, there would be a process through which we go through the process and we select a candidate. Should a person from Hickman Mills be told, because Dr. Carpenter's there, you can't apply? That's not right, as an old HR person. So the question is the process. And if there's a process and a position, and a Hickman Mills person rises to the top of that process, how wouldn't they be the recommendation? But the process is what's important, and that's what we'll focus on. I would tell you that classified staff are just certified people close your ears. But I just got this special love for classified staff as an old deputy superintendent for operations, and being around that cabinet level, I think we call it the SLT table, and fighting for those classified employees when everyone else is fighting for certified. So I got this special place in my heart for classified employees. You talk about the whole salary issue at Hickman Mills. Let me tell you what I committed to the board. And I think we got a member or two here that will remember this sentiment. I will not recommend anything for the certified staff if we don't recommend something for the classified staff who've been frozen for the last 6 or 7 years. I said that to our board. I said that's not fair and it's not equitable. A word that you'll hear from me a lot. So I'm proud to say we put in a 3-year plan to get our classified employees caught up who lost 7 steps. And guess what we did? We implemented in 2 years. And every classified employee in the district is now for the first time in about 8 years on the appropriate salary schedule step. So that speaks to my thoughts about classified staff. I think there was one more I did miss. Micromanager. I tell people all the time, I believe myself to be a coach. I see a few supportive principals and executives from my current district in the audience. Maybe they're the best people to answer this question. I view myself as a coach and a facilitator, but I will also tell you when it gets to the point that it becomes a dilemma and a decision has to be made, I realize the buck stops here and I'll help in making a decision. But as far as their work, Ms. Tara, do I micromanage you? I close my ears. Yeah, I just close my ears. I just see Ms. Tara, one of my cabinet members back there. Don't really think I'm a micromanager.
Okay, very good. You're also a fast talker, I noticed. So I wasn't ready. Give me 1 second. There's lots of good questions here still. So let's go with the transition. I know that a few of you have missed because it was a lot to handle in a short time. So later on, I'm going to keep moving forward, but there are a couple of questions I did miss that I'm going to save later on so that we can keep moving forward on other issues. But I'm seeing a couple of specific questions that I really want to respect some of these because some of these people actually have championed me before, and I owe that to them. Okay. But let's talk about Lee Summit. We've got some numerous questions about our district. So, do you want to talk about your first, maybe your first 3 priorities, or do you want me to get into some of these specific questions about some of the programs in our district? Because I'll give you a couple here.
We'll just fire one. Let's get this.
All right, here's someone running for school board. Kim Ritchie, she says, what are your top 3 goals for our district?
Top 3 goals for our district. I believe if I've heard the board loud and clear, one goal is to reestablish this whole public trust thing. And so that's something that I'm going to keep my ear to the ground on as I enter the district and in the first 100 days and beyond. That's going to be a focus. I also believe that similar, but a little bit different, that involves lots of communication. I've been in conversation already with Ms. Phelan, the district's communications person, and I would tell you that she and I are going to be best friends as we work through this transition. I believe that's something that's very, very important at this point in time to our community. The other goal I have is to get through my entry plan, to really get through it because there are lots of meetings, lots of conversations, lots of groups I want to engage with. And once that is done, my plan would be to present in an open session meeting of the board those common trends and patterns that came out of that 100-day planning process. And then talk about potential recommendations for the board to consider related to those trends and themes. That's pretty much all I'm thinking about right now.
So,
I would tell you, just to wrap that up, giving comparisons, not the way I entered my current district. I was literally being told, the house is on fire, the house is on fire. And now I'm being told, the mansion is clean, maybe a little dust in one place, don't worry about anything. I can honor that. I can honor that. Absolutely. It feels good to honor that. I can honor that.
No, that's great. What about, though, you said, I'm trying to look and read it at the same time, but I heard you talk about building trust in the community. But there was one in here that made me realize we've got a lot of trust to build in-house.
Right.
And I think I felt that this week more than ever. I mean, I felt it before, believe me. We went through a lot last year, in the last year, but it came out big time this time. And yeah, the community struggles trusting our board. We've had a rough 12 months. And in my view, it's been longer than that because we've been accused of rubber stamping and things like that. So we need help, the board. We need you to, the district needs help with the community. But I got to tell you, we gotta be good on the inside first. So can you talk about that with the teachers and the staff and such? I mean, I heard you say certified staff and such, but I'm talking, we gotta have some quick, real talk, in-house. So,
Okay. I will tell you that will start. I had my first opportunity to engage a few minutes ago prior to this meeting with the district's leadership team. And I think we'll start there and see how we can get those conversations to permeate throughout the buildings. And I will tell you that in that 100-day plan, one of my goals is to get into every building at least 2 times in that first 100 days.
Every building? We got a lot of buildings.
I know, about 25. So in 100 days, I should be able to get into all of them twice. Should be able to.
That would be, that'd be very welcome.
It can happen. And with that being said, we're going to go in and just really forward some of those relationships I've heard some things already. I don't want to comment on them because I want to see if it becomes a trend or a theme or not. And that's the purpose of the 90-day, 100-day plan, is to look for trends and themes. But I would tell you, I'm a communicator. Even people, I make decisions or the district makes decisions, people are negatively impacted. That does not stop me from communicating. I'm still going to communicate. I'm still going to put students at the center, and I'm still going to look for that coalition of people who want to engage in that work. So I understand the whole sentiment about internal, and that's the work, that's just the job.
Very good. You talked about the trust, so we had quite a few questions about trust, and you're there. You know we got a lot of trust to rebuild in this community. Let's go specifically to a few questions, because, well, I've heard about quite a few of these. Let's just lump these two together: early childhood education and special education. What kind of experience do you have with each one of those? And we're proud of we want to be great in both areas. And we're trying to find money to be great, because it comes down to that. Do you have some thoughts for us, because you've had success there?
I'm an early childhood education major, former 4th grade teacher, and I would tell you early childhood is a passion of mine. And I would tell you that we have done some things around early learning. See, early learning is the key, if you look at what some of the research says about a child's ability to move from one standard deviation below the poverty line into the middle class. That research is out there, that the surest way of doing that is through high quality, not just early learning, high quality early learning. So that's something that we've engaged in as a district in Hickman Mills for all students. Because 100% of our students, we do know, qualify for free and reduced lunch. And a significant number of those are at least one standard deviation below the poverty line. So we didn't have a lot of disaggregating to do in terms of that becoming a priority. Board supported it. We're excited about that work. Still working on that quality indicator. We're about 2 years in, but we have the foundation and the framework in place for it. So when I look at Lee's Summit, and you ask that question, I want to learn more about Great Beginnings. I just met the principal today. Where are you at? She's still here. She was here. I saw her early. She and I had a good conversation brief conversation about early learning. But the situation is so very different in terms of students and where they reside as it relates to their socioeconomic status. So we may have to, again, look at early learning, but tackle it very, very different. And there are different ways that different communities tackle it, the likes of Lee Summit. We can figure that out together. Special education. I would tell you that if my memory is serving me correct, after preparing for 4 grueling interviews, the last of which was 4 hours, I just thought I'd let the community know about that. I recall that there are about 2 indicators as it relates to the state's data in which Lee Summit trails. And I think, and I'm referring to graduation rate, and I think those 2 areas were SPED graduation rate and ELL graduation rate, in which we trail the state's average. So even in a 98, give or take, % MSIP score, we have to honor the fact that all data has leverage points. All data has a space in which we enter to improve. That might be one such area. We've done some things in that area in our district that we're proud of, and there are things that can be done. But again, that's a collaborative approach. That's learning more about individual students and where those struggles are, and how do we start making those connections via the data.
How brave are you tonight? How brave?
How brave am I?
Yeah. You want this next question? Here we go. What are your thoughts that's related to special education? It's kind of like a follow-up. What are your thoughts, specific thoughts, on inclusion of special education students with the general education, with their educational peers. I've had that one before, and that's, tough.
Yes, I think that there are students in which their needs are specifically academic in nature. And when those issues are academic in nature only, there is some opportunity to make certain that said students are exposed to the general education curriculum. And despite our best efforts, and special ed folks in the audience, I totally come in peace. This is no indictment against Lee Summit. This is simply around the country. The data is very clear that when we pull those students out, they oftentimes receive inferior instruction in areas in which they have no academic deficiency, when we focus too much on a pull-out model. So put another way, a child is learning disabled in the area of language arts. If we don't pay careful attention, he or she can be receiving inferior instruction in mathematics in an area that he or she has no disability. So when we do that, expect to trail Missouri, if that's an occurrence. That's one example, in that type of an area.
Expect what?
Expect to trail Missouri in terms of graduation rate if we make that type of a decision in our learning space. Not saying that that is happening, that's national. So there's some indicators that we can look for in the area of special education, and just by tweaking something here or there around scheduling and around minutes, we can expose kids to that content that's necessary in those areas that we're not making progress in, and we should not be losing ground. I've seen that, I will tell you that in district positions now, 1, 2, this will be the 3rd district position. I've seen that in the other 2. And so Lee Summit is awesome. Might not be the case in Lee Summit, but we've seen it. We see it around the country. Kids are placed in special ed environments, have nothing to do with their disability, and they're losing ground in content areas that they should be on grade level with their peers. It happens.
I actually have a lot of teacher friends that are special education teachers, so I do know that their job is as tough as it gets at times. And so what would they say about that? Because I don't know. I mean, in other words, does that make their job harder? Because it's already pretty tough.
Very tough job, and you have to honor special education teachers across that sphere continuum. But I will tell you, with the right services, there are too many examples in which those models can be effective, because it's based on the student's individualized plan, right? So we have to make certain that we are developing the right plan for each and every student. Because sometimes, I've been around scheduling meetings all over this country, and what we say, let's get the SPED kids scheduled. And that becomes this rat race to get the SPED kids scheduled, and maybe we revisit it during an IEP meeting, maybe we revisit it during the annual meeting. By then, they may have been misscheduled for a full year. That doesn't happen in Lee Summit. It happens in other places around the country.
Okay, I'm going to put Julie down on the spot because this is one of her passions here. I'm going to have her ask this question.
Yeah, a lot of passions. Well, someone wants to ask, no, will they bring back sports and band activities for 5th and 7th graders?
What, just overall, I mean, I know that's a specific question. You don't know the history, but the fact is, during our tight years, cost containment, I understand you have a different idea of what cost containment is, in Hickman Mills. But for us, this was a big deal. This is a music and theater and art, performing arts type of community, and this is really personal stuff for us. So, thoughts?
Okay. I would just tell you, without knowing the history, it'd be hard for me to really engage that question with any level of specificity. But what I will say is there are students who stay engaged in our work because of the arts and because of athletics. And even as an old operations guy, when I look at this whole notion of cost containment, I honor that we exist to effectively educate students. And because we exist to effectively educate students, then we should really set some goals and cost containment processes that honor those things that are important to students to the degree that the budget will allow. So that comes down to what are your priorities, how do you frame those up front, and I hear that there's a story there I need to learn more about.
Just we like we believe in extracurricular activities. I do, I'm sorry. Most of this board does, and we want to find a way to get them back, where they enrich the lives of our students. And we think a lot of education goes on in those areas as well. So,
Absolutely.
okay. We're getting into some different kinds of questions. Some of these, because you're on the topic, I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple out here, but if Dr. Carpenter, like this, there's some of them that just might be might take too long to answer, but I do get where this is coming from, because if you watch the national news, but here's one question from Ryan. Ryan says, what is your position on proficiency versus growth?
I guarantee you I can give a better answer than the person trying to reconfirm the other thing.
That's good, because
So Ryan, there's no story in this answer. Okay. I believe that growth is an important indicator for kids who are not on grade level, and that we kill teacher morale, we kill teacher drive, and many other things when we don't honor growth, when we know students come to us with so many deficiencies and needs. So growth is an important indicator, and it matters. But the expectation should always be proficiency and beyond. And what we're finding on Missouri assessments, even though they're some of the most rigorous in the country, they are still on a national and international level, just kind of like a minimal place that we need to be in. So in a place like Lee's Summit, I would tell you that proficiency should drive us, proficiency and beyond, I might add. And in those few spaces that we were talking about a little bit earlier, we have to honor growth. We have to honor growth, but realizing what I just said earlier, we do students and families a disservice when we do not make certain that they're exposed to on-grade level content. But while we do that, we start packing the teacher's toolbox and things that we can do with the students in terms of safety nets. What are some safety nets? And what are some remediations that we can put in place even as we realize proficiency is the bar? And even in a state like Missouri, that's known for more rigorous assessments, the national data on negatives telling us it's still a pretty basic bar.
There we go.
I mentored in a public school.
You what?
That was another part of the news story from yesterday.
You did really well. You did a lot better than she did.
Somebody watched it. Maybe a few people saw it. I saw it.
There's a lot of memes going around today, that's for sure. There's some specific questions here. I don't, well, first, this is an easy one probably. What's your thoughts on Parents as Teachers program?
Parents as
How do
teachers.
you plan to support that?
Parents as teachers. And this, again, getting sleep from somebody else. Remember that. Don't get sleep from somebody else. And I know where that question probably comes from.
Yeah.
The Hickman Mills C1 school district.
Right.
We realize that students who come to school with deficiencies benefit from engagement and learning at the earliest level. You know, they said, Dr. Carpenter, you got all 4-year-olds? And I said, we had the money, we do 3-year-olds. And somebody said, listen to him and his early childhood philosophy, he'll go get them out of the hospital. I had one of the teachers say that, and it was kind of, I don't know if it was an insult or not, but I kind of laughed about it, because really, when kids have that level of deficiency, you might need to get them from the hospital. Because we know that they're going into homes with a 30 million word gap. So we know that when they come to school, they're going to be placed in a kindergarten classroom where kids have heard 30 million more words than they've heard, and we're going to expect them to be on grade level. So unfortunately, there are kids living in situations that might be better off if we had an opportunity to get them from a hospital. So with that being said, PATs are a vital part of that. In the Hickman Mills C1 school district, who would have figured? The board decided we needed to look at parents as teachers' salaries. Because we found out that our parent educators, in many, many cases, were making more than our teachers who sit with students all day in the classroom. And we found out that we were paying parent educators more than any other district in the state of Missouri in some cases. So when that gets placed in line with all the neighboring districts, instead of that being honored in terms of being fiscally responsible, it turns into the superintendent doesn't support parent educators.
Do you,
Of course I support the parent educators. I'm an early learning person.
how did that come to be? Do you even, I mean, I know you're loyal to your district, but, and I want you to be careful, but how did that come to be that they're the highest paid in the state, and it's not like you had the income there to support?
Yes, it was prior to my arrival. I don't want to speak too much out of turn. It was simply brought to my attention as a problem area that needs to be looked at. And when I'm told to look at a problem area, I go in with no preconceived notions. I simply look at the data and what are the facts. And the facts were clear. Our parent educator pay was way out of line with any other district in the state. So we did some things to come into alignment regionally. And instead of that process being honored because of how it had to be done, it becomes this conversation about support of parent educators. Again, sleep where it doesn't belong. Why would an old early childhood person not support parental education in a district like Hickman Mills?
I was going to add on to that as well. Also, as maybe Carrie James can help me out with that.
Pull your microphone down.
Parents I was going to add into that, parents as teachers as a whole in the state of Missouri was cut. I don't remember what year it was. 2011, yeah. The state of Missouri cut funding for parents as teachers down to, I don't know what off the top of my head, I don't know the numbers, but it basically cut, to where most districts could hardly afford to still provide that as a service. Say that right, Carrie?
Right, and sitting on the Commissioner's Advisory Council, that was a topic sometime last year, and there was some confusion in the room among superintendents because they felt that they were obligated to continue the program even with the cuts. And Desi was very clear, there is no obligation to continue this program. It's dependent upon your local district's budget. So that was made very, very clear by officials at Desi as I sit on the Commissioner's Advisory Council.
Okay, very good. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple more. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, specifics. And then I'm going to ask questions of the board. I've got a list of questions for the board and for us to answer to. So you've been on the hot seat a while, but one person says, what can you tell us about the Pacific Education Group, your grant? How it's impacted your school discipline and teacher retention? I don't know enough about that one, so.
Yes. I think I alluded to Pacific Educational Group.
Okay, question is, can you tell us about the grant with the Pacific Educational Group, how it's impacted the school with discipline and teacher retention?
Good question. The Pacific Educational Group is the group that does our racial equity training. That's not a grant, that's a board expenditure. That's a board expenditure. There is no grant for their work in our district. And we believe that it has been in second year of implementation, as I recall. We're in the second year, maybe 2.5 years of that work. I wish I could tell you that I could align it to retention in a positive or a negative way. I just simply can't do it. I don't have any data to support a statement about that. And as it relates to the impact of their work, absolutely. I can tell you that teachers who have embraced that work, leaders who have embraced that work, they learned a protocol, and now they look at decisions at the building level more so through an equity lens. Whereas before we were looking at decisions through an equal lens. Put another way, we're all trying to watch this baseball game. Some of you have seen this. And we all have varying heights. And I walk by and I give everyone a milk carton to watch the baseball game over the privacy fence. You've seen the picture, many of you have. Well, for some children, that milk carton or that milk crate, they still can't see it. For another child, he's got to do like this. It helped, but it didn't quite give him everything he needed, but if he puts forth a lot of effort, he can see it. And for this child who could already see it, like he was sitting in the stadium, then now he's got an aerial view to look at it. And that's what Equal has done in lots of districts over time. Pacific Education Group's work challenges you to look at things from an equity standpoint, meaning giving every child what they need versus giving every child the same thing. That's a philosophical shift. It's not what we're taught in the universities. It is not what's normally done in schools. So some of our schools now are really beginning to lean into that equity work in a different way. And I think some of them will tell you it's made a difference. I brag on one of our buildings, Johnson Elementary School. I would tell you she is probably the most gung-ho principal, white Latina female. She's probably one of the most gung-ho leaders as it relates to racial equity. And she said to me the other day, Dr. Carpenter, this work has helped me to turn some things around at Johnson. She was on DES's watch list. What's it called? You have to be on the RSET team, and you're on this list, and you have to come visit your school once a month, yada, yada, yada. She's off the list. And I would tell you that she attributes that to her work around equity and her team looking at things through an equity lens. And Monday, when I left here for the press conference, and I went back and I met with my leadership team, when the meeting was over, she came to me with tears falling. And she said, Dr. Carpenter, you don't know what this equity work has done, and nobody's going to have the courage to do it when you leave. She said, I probably think about doing something different. That's a student-centered leader. That's student-centered leadership, giving every child what they need.
Okay, one more specific question. What is ELSE? It says, why did you pull your son out of because you didn't like the curriculum rather than work and change it? So I've seen a couple of these questions, and I don't understand about it. So.
I will tell you this, and I'll be very clear. I'll answer about any question in here, but my family's off limits. I'll answer about any question in here, but Landon and Layla and LaQuanda are simply off limits. And I've said that to my board, and I've said to this group, they're off limits. They're off limits.
They're cute. I've seen them. Okay, so I'm going to let you take a breather. All right? I will say this before I ask the board some questions. We will come back to Dr. Carpenter. I am going to ask him some more hard questions. So you don't get to relax quite yet. But the fact is, at this point, I will say that during these next questions are going to be very much about the process that we followed as the board. And I'll let board members answer as they see fit. But just to start it off, I'll say what you just saw for the last, I don't know how long it's been, an hour and a half or whatever. We had some great candidates. And I know that for some people, they're asking us how. Why did we choose Dr. Carpenter over these other candidates? Weren't there some other great candidates? I mean, how can you do this? And the fact is, the resume was basically flawless and was stellar. And then, every single time we would do the interviews, that guy showed up right there. And that made it tough, because it's like, well, man, he is good. He's got answers. He didn't have to think. He didn't have to dig deep and really, like, what do they want me to say? Because that's natural in an interview process. What do they want me to say? What do I need to say to this group of board members in Lee Summit? And he just spoke from the heart. He's knowledgeable, and he's professional, and he goes deep. And that's the kind of guy I like, someone that goes deep. Someone that gets into the nitty-gritty, someone that will answer these questions. We all knew he would walk in here and shoot you straight. And you may not even like some of his answers. But that's who he is, and we respected that. And we respect that what he's doing here tonight with us. But guess what? Now the board gets to answer some questions. So let's put this back on ourselves for a moment. And, would you like to say something? Yes.
Yes, I would like to say something. Our district, something that I have seen and been a part of for 5 years since I've had the privilege of serving on the board, is that we are huge advocates in the state of Missouri. We are a presence and a force to be reckoned with down in Jeff City. And when I had the opportunity during the interview to ask Dr. Carpenter about the shape of public education, because folks, it can be under fire. It's a big concern. With our new transition in presidency and the hiring of new Betsy DeVos, who is a big private school, charter school person. So this is really near and dear to my heart because I have made trips to DC. I have gone to Jeff City. And I really would like Dr. Carpenter to talk to them about your role in legislation that you've played and what you do with the Greater Kansas City Cooperative School Districts, because it's really, you need to hear about it, because this is something that is important to our district to stay in the forefront of legislation and fighting for public schools. Sorry, I'm making him get up again, but I really want him to talk about this.
Thank you. I would tell you that you don't have to look very far to see that public schools in their purest forms are under fire. I think that there are decisions being made at the national level around appointments that speak directly to that. And I will say that Missouri has undergone a shift legislatively that might also speak to that. So the question is, how do we advocate for those things that work in terms of our school district? And serving as the president of the Greater Kansas City School Administrators Association, I get to be involved to some degree in that advocacy work. I will also tell you, as the superintendent of the Hickman Mills C1 school district, I unapologetically took the state on as it relates to some issues around equity in this one-size-fits-all accountability system that we know does not serve schools and communities well. And it further disenfranchises communities that struggle, and they just become chaotic around what improvement is or is not in that space. And what it does is it fractures communities, and in turn, public schools should be the hub of community, and now we're pushing students out, in many cases in communities that want to stay the way they are and just take care of their folks in the community. And why not? You're the taxpayer, you're the resident. So what the driver is a broken accountability system that believes a student in Hickman Mills should be scoring at the same level as a student in Lee Summit. And we know that parents at the bottom decile in terms of earning, since 1970, we can look at the Putnam study, you can look it up, the Putnam study. Since 1970, parents at the lowest decile have been spending $750 per year annually on enrichment spending for their child. That's anything from a swim lesson, to buying them a book, to buying an educational game, to bringing a tutor into the home, to purchasing early learning for that child. $750. It's been pretty constant, $700 to $800 per year since 1970. And in 1970, for the top decile of parents, many of which who reside in communities like Lee Summit, they were spending $3,000. And around 2000, that number was eclipsing $6,000, moving into $7,000 per child. So I was reading this study one day, and my wife and I decided to put it to the test. And we started writing everything. And guess what? The study was spot on for us. It was spot on for us. So how can a one-size accountability system work if those are facts? If those are really facts, how can it work? And why would you destroy a community with that system and disenfranchise their public schools, create transfer, create charters and the like to further disenfranchise the community and say that they're failing, and then infringe upon other communities? So I see some of this probably increasing as the move goes toward vouchers, charters, and the like. So how do you create a space to work with the commissioner and provide a different perspective that might not be there to try and slow some of these things? Although I can tell you, I believe this legislative session will come out of this session with some things that are different in public ed, because I believe there's too much leverage on one side and not enough balancing to stop it. But how do we stand in the breach and try and create a space for some of those conversations?
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
You sure? Okay. Some questions for the school board, so we can run through a few of these, give Dr. Carpenter a break for a minute, and then we'll try to wrap up. I'm going to try to summarize and give opportunities to bring this to a close, so some of you can leave. Afterwards, we're going to let Dr. Carpenter is going to be up here, and we'll be up here, so we'll take individual questions, and I'll address a few of those before we go. But so a few questions for the board. Why were Dr. Carpenter's credentials, or were Dr. Carpenter's credentials checked with DESE? Our attorney, Joe Hatley, at the end says that yes, that's standard due diligence to ensure certification. Someone says, did the buyout of Dr. McGehee affect your ability to offer top dollar to qualified candidates? I can tell you, I know the answer to that one. No, it did not. We are a district in fantastic financial standing. We just went through, our financials were just gone through by, and with the UMC, the Summit Tech, the MIC, we've been so thoroughly vetted by the financial people. We are in a good position. That's not at all the case. Was a nationwide search truly conducted? Yes, we did do a nationwide search. The company, we did have, it was probably more applications were regional rather than, all across the country. But definitely, as far away as, way north, way south, things like that. And yes, when they brought us the 6 candidates that we had narrowed down to, and the guy from Hickman was on the list, we all went, we had the same maybe reaction that most of you did. And just to be honest, we all sat there going, well, we can interview him, but no. That was our initial reaction. We have our bias as well. And then, like I said, this guy showed up. Please explain how he's more qualified than someone who isn't involved in lawsuits. So I chose to move this one because it's actually a good question, I think, because he is in the lawsuits. Maybe he's not named, and I'm not going to get in. If you have any specific questions tonight with regard to the law cases, I'm sorry, Mr. Hatley, at the end, but come up and ask him and talk to him. He can explain. The guy, Joe Hatley, is the greatest. The man knows his stuff. He is here for a reason. But the question is, how is he more qualified than someone who isn't involved in these types of things? And I hate to tell you, we've had the most magnificent man as the interim superintendent right now, Dr. Benson. And believe me, Dr. Benson has taken me and said, Bill, you need to chill. These things happen in public schools. You get sued, these things happen, and you can't change things overnight. You have got to let things play out. You have to be patient, let Joe Hatley do his job, and you do your job. Okay, so I am telling you that if you don't know about this, if you don't realize how bad it is, that's the worst part of the job. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would just like to add to that I'm sure Dr. Benson would verify this, and I know I have some other friends in the audience who have similar experiences to mine, and I am almost willing to bet my board salary on this next answer, but I would be willing to bet that if we had looked at any sitting superintendent in any district in the country, we would have found lawsuits. it's a part of doing business as a school system. I know Dr. Benson would verify that. I'm almost certain he would.
I will.
Yeah, 7.
No.
So, it's 7 o'clock. Oh, that's what he was saying. I misinterpreted your signal. So I think there are a few other things that just from a perspective of those of us who have been administrators over a long period of time, you just don't avoid that. And, that's the part of doing business as a school and a school board. I think several years ago, even in Lee's Summit, we had every school board member named in a specific lawsuit. So, it's just things that need to be, that come with the job. That come with the job.
And in their personal capacity as well as their capacity.
Okay, this next question, for those of you that have been patient this long, this one really gets to the heart of the matter. And it's Dr. Carpenter, he can do all this philosophizing tonight and tell us his theories and everything of, and how things should go and work and such. But this one's a Lee Summit community question, okay, to me. Because this is a tough one because it says this: why did you pick a superintendent with a negative or controversial history? Our staff, students, and community should not be dragged through the mud again. And here's the thing. No offense, Dr. Carpenter, but yeah, you've been a part of some controversy. Hickman Mills. In Georgia, you have a situation that's well documented on the internet. There's questions up here about the Georgia issue and things like that. Holy cow, just go read. I'll send you articles. Joe Hatley will send you articles. It was nothing that this man or his family did. And in fact, he took the high ground all the way through. But this question is so relevant, though, because, okay, fine, he didn't do anything wrong. Okay, fine, he's a great administrator, and he's in the Hickman Mills School District. Why would we pick someone so negative or so controversial, given the fact of what we just went through? And that's the answer to that for me, and I can only speak for myself on this one, okay? So other board members will have to tell you what they think. But it comes down to this. I was elected to as an official, to be a representative of the community. And I take that very seriously. And so when we got down to it and we're comparing candidates, was I supposed to say, you know what, I think there's just too much, what people like to say, baggage, controversy or whatever. We can't handle this. Lee Summit can't handle this. That would have been my call, Bill Baird. I would have had to push for that and say, we can't handle it. But the thing is, I had to sit back and say, what is the criteria that we were given? What attributes did the community say? We were given 20 attributes. We narrowed it to 6. And basically it said, this is what we want. This is what we want. It didn't say on there, we don't want someone from that type of district. It didn't say those things. It said all the things you wanted in a leader. And so we went through it, and then was I supposed to say, when this man ends up at the top of the list, and I'm speaking, I'm not speaking about work, this is just me. He's at the top of the list, he's shown that he's the best over and over again throughout the process, and then at the end say, yeah, but he's, I know what's best for Lee Summit, I'm not going to vote for this man to be our next superintendent. And that's not to me what an elected official does. You gave us a task, and I felt like I was fulfilling that task. I felt like I was doing what was best for Lee Summit, not necessarily Bill Baird, okay? Not necessarily what I wanted or thought or worried about, because you never know. Had I done that, I might have said, no, Dr. Carpenter, I'm going to say no on it because I don't think Lee Summit can handle it. And I read through all the stuff, and I knew that it wasn't his doing that created controversy. Anybody that takes a leadership position in any type of district or community, or even in your family, there's going to be controversy at times. So that's what I have to say.
I would all add to that. I would say that if there was a superintendent who went into Hickman Mills in 2013, didn't have controversy. In 2017, that superintendent wasn't doing their job during that time. But I want to add a few things to what Bill was talking about earlier, and just from my own perspective as well. I went in with a bias. When we got a list of, final 6 that were recommended to us, and I looked at it, just like Bill said, and I took the Hickman Mills and I put it to the bottom of the list. And like, why are they sending us the guy from Hickman Mills? And then I went through them, reviewed all of them, and I got to him. I mean, it looks pretty good on paper. Then we interviewed him, and he came right up to the top. And then we had final interviews with 2, and I after at first interview, I said to my wife, she didn't even know who we were interviewing, and I said, Dr. Carpenter was second. I said, I don't know how we can do any better than what we already interviewed. He came to the top, and everything he said, he wasn't telling us what he felt we wanted to hear. He was telling us what we needed to hear, what a superintendent needs to be doing in a school district, not what, saying what needs to be said just to get the job. He was saying all the right things and he went in and, in the interview process, like he said earlier, it was 4 hours. He had dug into our numbers, and he was telling us things about our district that he had already looked at, things that are already on my mind of where we need help in our district from a superintendent. And he hit every one of those right on the head. And he just, everything he did in his interview was right. I might not agree with his politics, but I'm not hiring him to be a politician. I'm hiring him to be a superintendent of schools. And we're hiring him to be the best for all of our students, every student in our district. And we have needs in our district, and those needs are only increasing. If you look at our numbers and the students that we have in our district and how those numbers have increased, those numbers are only going to keep increasing. When I started my kids started in at least some schools 15 years ago, I think our free and reduced was in single digits. Our free and reduced lunch is now right 20, I remember off the top of my head, yeah, we're in the 20s, we're right there. And that number, I will tell you, will go up. When you see, everybody here, parents, you care about your kids' education. That's why you're sitting in this room. But your kids are going to school, and they have a kid sitting right next to them who's going home and doesn't have a parent who's working from home. And we got to find a way to educate those kids and help those kids just as much as we're helping the kids at the top. Because where Lee Summit can improve, and this was exactly one of the things that Dr. Carpenter said to us, our improvement is from the bottom. And that's where our numbers need improvement, is from the bottom. We've got great students, and we have to continue to maintain those great students. But we got to find a way to bring those at the bottom up. And they're only going to continue to be more and more of those students at the bottom. And I think that Dr. Carpenter is the right person to help us to bring those students from the bottom, bring them up, but yet still maintain the services for those students that we have already up here at the top.
Usually Chris and I are on the same page, but another way to look at that is we're building this awesome MIC. We're going to be known nationally for the MIC. And it's going to be housed, I'm telling you, I couldn't go there. Because these kids are the 3/8 4 O's, 4-3, 2-3, whatever it is. Cream of the crop, not Julie Jones. And we are adding a hospitality, so I maybe be in that mix, but, and then we have these other kids that are gonna go off to a 4-year college, and they're great kids too. But we have to lift up this, and we have to help those kids, so that they can go on to college, or the MIC. Chris and I are always on the same page, it's sad.
Real quickly, has Lisa ever faced controversy before? Dennis, what do you think? Have we always managed to rise above it? Have we become a better community than we were before? Every time that we are faced with a controversy, every time that we are faced with a challenge, have we not as a community risen above it and made ourselves better? And if we can't do that, we are not the community that I thought we were. And I believe that we are that community.
Fantastic. I have a few questions left, but what I'd like to do is just ask if Randy Kane's a fantastic man that cares about this community. Did he leave? Okay. I was going to ask him. I'm going to ask Joe Hadley to give him a call. He's an attorney and he knows his stuff and he's looking out for us. I'm going to ask those of you that have specific questions. Man, some of these are so specific that it's time to wrap this up and then come up here. And I've got questions. Some of these I couldn't ask. Some of them just weren't, it's not the place for. I'm not saying they're inappropriate, but one of them's talking about, holding school-sponsored events on Sundays. I mean, like right now, I'm trying to stay focused on some of these other issues, but come on up and talk. Some are asking about schedule pay versus pay for performance and things like that. There's some questions about the BWP, the search firm. Ask me about it, ask Bob about it. Come up here and we'll stick around, we'll answer questions more specific to what you're needing. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Bob unless maybe give Dr. Carpenter one last word or any other board members. Yes, sir.
I would simply like to thank the community for investing this time. It speaks volumes about those of you who've invested and who've been here, because there will be other opportunities for you to invest in your child's education by way of time. And just showing that commitment is super important. And our leaders, I know you're inundated with night meetings and the like, and some of you are so invested in what's going on for the students in your buildings and in those programs that you service. You hung around as well. Teachers, if you're not any teachers, get up for teachers. I love teachers. Because I know you all have had full days. Thank you for thinking that it's not robbery to spend a little bit of time with your incoming superintendent. I'm super excited and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you much.
As time allows over the next months, Dr. Carpenter will be making more and more opportunities available to visit with our community in various groups. We're working on scheduling a lot of those right now, and as soon as we get those scheduled, we will get those out to the community or to the groups that we are wanting to get out and visit with. Again, I thank you all for your attention tonight, for your respect, and mostly for the good questions that you asked. Thank you so much, and good night.